Good morning, and welcome to day 183 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. Today we continue looking at the resurrection appearances of Jesus as found in John chapter 20 and 21. And as in the other Gospels, the first people to find the empty tomb are not Jesus' disciples, as we think of them at least, it's the women. Mary Magdalene and the others find the empty tomb with the stone rolled away, and they go and tell the disciples. And notice that even though Simon Peter is among the disciples that go to the tomb, it's almost as though he hesitates. He's not the first to go in. Verse 4 says that the two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. Stooping down, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then following him, Simon Peter also came. Why might Peter be hesitating? Well, probably because he had denied Jesus 3 times on the night that he was betrayed. Now that Jesus is resurrected and vindicated, what might that imply for Peter? After this, we see that Mary Magdalene recognizes the risen Lord, but first she mistakes him for a gardener. And I think that's a little bit of irony, hearkening all the way back to Genesis. After all, the Gospel of John presents Jesus as the Word, the one through whom creation was spoken, made flesh. And where does the creation story start? It starts in the Garden of Eden. Now that Jesus has redeemed and renewed creation, or at least inaugurated that work, where is the risen Christ first discovered? In the garden and as a gardener. I think that's too ironic to be coincidental. After this, Jesus appears to the disciples, minus Thomas, and he gives them a commission of sorts. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you. But of course, Thomas is not there, so he wants proof. And we call Thomas Doubting Thomas because of this. But Jesus does not rebuke Thomas. He redirects Thomas. When he sees him, he says, put your finger here and look at my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Don't be faithless, but believe. And Thomas responds to him, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, because you have seen me, you believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. And this is something we find also in Peter's epistles. The majority of those who come to faith in Jesus don't see the risen Christ per se. We see the effect of his work through the power of the Holy Spirit in the lives of those who have come to believe. Just as we saw God by God sending Jesus, so we see Jesus by Jesus sending his church. But this all, of course, raises the question for Peter. When we look at Mark chapter 16, the ladies who come to the tomb are told, go and tell the disciples and Peter. It's as though Peter is on the outside. When Peter comes to the tomb, he hesitates to go in. Why? Again, because he denied Christ 3 times. And that's why we have, I think, John chapter 21. Jesus makes another appearance to his disciples. And I want to draw 2 points of attention to that. It says in verse 14 that this was the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. 3 denials of Jesus, 3 appearances of Jesus, to go with Peter. Second, verse 9 says that when Jesus appeared to them, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish lying on it and bread. Why do I think this is interesting? Because charcoal fires are only mentioned twice in the Gospel of John. One is here in John chapter 21. The other one is in the courtyard of the high priest, where, you guessed it, Peter denied Jesus 1, 2, 3 times. It's a repeating of that pivotal scene. And then Jesus pulls Peter aside, Peter who had pledged undying loyalty to Jesus. And he asks him 3 times, do you love me? And then notice when Peter affirms all 3 times, of course, God, you know all things. Jesus, of course, you know I do. Notice that Jesus is referring to him as Simon rather than his disciple named Peter. Jesus tells him, feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my sheep. You love me not in your willingness to come to me, but in your willingness to go for me. Peter makes the connection of these threefold appearances, of these threefold questions. The 3rd time Jesus asked him, he realized this is because I denied him 3 times. And yet Jesus doesn't give him something new. He returns him to something old. He says, "Truly I tell you, when you were younger, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will tie you and carry you to the place where you don't want to go." In other words, one day, you've just denied me to save your skin 3 times, but one day you're going to go to the place you're unwilling to go now. And then he returns to the very first words he called to Peter when Peter became a disciple: "Follow me." That's what it's all about. It's about this Christ who dies for us and is raised, and despite our failures, bids us come to him, follow after him, that we may ultimately go for him. Peter is a challenge to all of us because he's not the perfect disciple. He's not the perfect follower of Christ. And yet he is a restored follower of Christ who ultimately does bold and great things for the kingdom. This should encourage us when we fall short and when we fail. That Christ's words to us when we fail are much like Christ's words when we begin to follow. Follow me. Follow after Jesus, that in due time, through the work of the Spirit, you may go for him as Peter did. Keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep responding, and I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.